much for joining us today. Today's webinar is focused on HR tech stack. So we're going to have a conversation around, is it time to streamline or expand? And we're going to focus on some real world experiences and examples of how HR leaders make those decisions. So thank you so much for spending time with us. I'm today's moderator. I'm Lauren Winans. I'm the CEO and principal HR consultant at Next Level Benefits HR Consulting. Prior to my consulting days, I was in corporate HR at a variety of organizations. And when I started Next Level Benefits 6 years ago, had the intention of really helping to be an extension, an on-demand extension of an HR team. Also, working with small business leaders as they scale and grow their organizations. So just a little bit more about us before we kick things off. We are a leading boutique HR consulting firm. We do act as an extension of your team. We've got a team of HR consultants who are former corporate HR professionals who can drop in, fill in the gaps on your team, handle special projects, and really be that fractional resource as you tackle all things HR. Today's panelists, I'm very excited to have them today. First, I'll introduce you to Rochelle Schwint. She is our lead HR consultant and client relationship director at Next Level Benefits. With over 20 years of professional HR experience, Rochelle definitely has a proven track record of developing HR in startup organizations and optimizing HR in established organizations. She's always looking for ways to align her clients' strategic goals to their people practices. And prior to consulting, Rochelle worked in various corporate HR leadership roles at Blue Origin, Brevard Public Schools, and DynCorp International, among many others. So thanks for being with us, Rochelle. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on to Lisa. Lisa Scavarla, with over 2 decades in HR talent strategy, development, and culture building. Lisa currently serves as Chief People Officer at the Food Bank of Santa Barbara County. She brings practical insight into how HR leaders can partner with business leaders, shape culture for impact, and drive measurable outcomes in both the nonprofit and the for-profit sectors. Thanks for joining us, Lisa. Really happy to have you.
Thanks, Lauren.
All right, and last but not least, Tara Welcheski. Tara's the Director of People Operations at STG Logistics, overseeing benefits, HR systems, and HR operations. She's previously held HR leadership positions with SPI, Weisiger Group, Route 21, and American Eagle Outfitters. She also has more than 2 decades of experience across benefits administration, comp, workplace safety, and HRIS. And she applies strong organizational and relationship building skills to partner effectively with both technical and non-technical teams. So thank you so much for being here with us, Tara.
Thank you, Lauren.
Awesome. Well, so we have a great panel. We've got a lot of great experience on the panel. And today we're going to be focused on, as I mentioned previously, HR tech stacks. So, there's a lot of conversation as it relates to how do we streamline the systems that we have, or how do we add additional technology resources to the tech stack that we already have? And so today is going to be truly an informal discussion around, how do you make those decisions? When is the right time? Maybe what are some lessons learned? And so we're really going to be covering, like I said, some real world experiences here about how to evaluate, optimize, and evolve HR systems. We're also going to talk about how to determine whether it's time to streamline or expand as the workforce evolves. And last but not least, we'll talk about lessons learned, successes achieved, and some cautionary tales I'm certain will come out of these conversations as well. So, really excited to have the group, ready to go here. And we're going to touch on some questions. I think the first question I'm just going to kind of jump right into is, what indicators tell you it's time to reevaluate your HR tech stack? What are some things that, are maybe like a lever or a gauge that you kind of make some decisions on? Is it budget? Is it data issues? Is it, just growth in an organization? Kind of, in your past experiences and even today when you're looking at your own systems at your organizations, kind of what are your thoughts on what are those indicators, and how do you evaluate when it's time? I'm going to go ahead and start with Tara and see, Tara, what your thoughts are as it relates to indicators when it's time to reevaluate.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think from my kind of past experience, growth of the company is a huge starting point. What works for a 200 employee company is not necessarily the same as you get to 1,500, 2,000, and more employees. So if you don't consider systems at that point, a lot of times your administrative efforts will outgrow your headcount growth, and it creates some definite budget issues. The other thing I'd add would be like employee comfort with technology. With over 20 years of experience early on, the questions around systems was like, do candidates even have email addresses, right? But now it's really looking at, okay, you have different generations working with you and making sure that you have mobile technology and that everybody can use it. Or the newer generation that's coming in, that's all they want, right? They don't necessarily even want to speak to a person sometimes. They want to be able to chat, get it done on mobile, and move forward. So really looking at what the employee experience is can help determine technology needs as well.
Great. Those are awesome answers. Lisa, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think Tara covered a lot of what I was thinking about in terms of definitely the maturity of the organization, like where it is in its growth path and its in terms of the employees and their comfort and abilities around technology. I think one thing that has really stood out to me over several of my positions is the amount of time that we're spending on the phone or on email with tech support has always been really telling to me of a time, like when it's time to reevaluate. Like if the tool isn't working for you, if you have to be in close partnership with somebody on the other side, that creates huge business inefficiencies and frustration for your team members if their tool isn't working for them. So that's been a really big indicator for me. And yeah, I've worked in places where we've really been moving from like manual systems into technology and kind of taking that first step. I've done that a few different times. And so it's just kind of, again, sometimes the budget comfort, like there's not always a big comfort in jumping if you're in kind of a culture where maybe they've done things more manually. But I think looking at the value of the time, like how much time and capacity your team members are spending on manual processes and how much is going to be saved, is a really big indicator for me as well as can we get time back by having a better system.
Great, great. And all right, Rochelle, I'm going to start with you on this next question. And it's kind of similar to what we were just talking about here as it relates to indicators. So, how do you determine whether the answer is to consolidate and some of your existing systems or expand your technology capabilities? Like what types of criteria and metrics are you taking a look at, after you have these indicators that have kind of giving you the heads up that you might need to be creating some efficiencies or, determining the way that employees like to receive or input information. So what do you think about, how do you determine which route to take, consolidate or expand?
So I think the first thing that you have to do is inventory your systems. One of the things that inventorying all of your systems will do is one, it opens up the conversation. Does your company have a technology committee? Usually those technology committees will give you a bigger picture on is finance thinking about getting a new timekeeping system? Is there another system that either feeds into an HRIS system or pushes data out of into another system? How are your integrations? Does the data really push? Is the push automated or is it a semi-automated thing that it happens automatically, but then someone has to touch it manually to make it actually integrate? So those are inefficiencies like both Lisa and Tara were talking about, and manual processes that add time. When you're pulling analytics, are you manipulating that data so much so that it looks like a completely different report when you're done? All of those things, and also looking at future work that your company is looking at, future growth. One time at a place I worked at, one of the reasons why we went to an integrated LMS is because that we were required by our government contractor, to produce analytics that the system just didn't have the ability to do. So that was the instigator, but it really ended up working out for all of our government contracts in that we were able to provide consistent and data that had been validated. When you're running parallel systems, regardless of whether it's your HRIS and your applicant tracking system, or your LMS versus your timekeeping system, or whatever the case may be, as you're pushing data, the more you are manually entering data, the more your data will not match, and you'll pull a report from two different systems and get two completely different answers. So all of those things put together can push you towards that decision. And taking a survey, an employee survey, like user experience, manager experience, leader experience, and ask them, are you getting what you expect out of the system? Is it easy to use? And is it something that everybody complains about at every staff meeting?
Yeah, I think too, sometimes we've got, especially within the HR realm, right? We've got systems or modules that might be, duplicating efforts too,
Sure.
And like, okay, not only do I have to figure out, all these different factors in terms of how does this system support the business, and is it the right setup? Is it the right, design? But also, what usually when you're purchasing HR systems, there's a little bit of everything in each one, and it's a decision on, do you jump in and get all of it, or do you kind of break it up and decide how you're going to piece some systems together that really provide you with exactly what you need,
right?
And kind of being able to customize. So
and you also might find that there is a module of a system you already own that you're not using.
Exactly. Yeah. Tara or Lisa, any comments here, and before we move on to the next question?
Yeah, I think Rochelle really had a good explanation with the inventory systems. The only thing I have learned from my history is making sure that it is a complete employee experience inventory of systems. I've gotten, lost sometimes when it was a HR focus. And from an employee perspective, they don't care if it's an HR system or a finance system, right? If Concur is not part of the onboarding process and it's delayed later on, that impacts the employee experience. So really making sure you're looking at the whole ecosystem for the employee is going to help any decision. And then the other thing that I ran into in my last company is just really the strategic reporting functionality. If you don't consolidate, you need to make sure you have a really good data warehouse reporting solution, or you're going to lose out on some of these strategic analytics and predictive analytics. It's a lot more manual to pull the multiple systems together and really drive some actionable reporting.
That's awesome.
You might also be limited by IT's ability to support.
Yes.
So it's definitely best to open that conversation sooner than later, and ensure, and this is why I mentioned the IT committee that we had, and it wasn't necessarily run by IT, but it had a representative from each functional area so that we could all talk about the things that we were lacking. You might find that a system that somebody else owns also has a module that you could use or integrate. So those technology committees can tell you whether there's staff available to help support it, or whether you're going to be on your own implementing it, and whether IT even supports the effort. You have to check security, cybersecurity things, and all of those little nitpicky things that aren't necessarily high on our radar. You'll find out in an IT committee.
Definitely.
Or a technology committee.
For sure. Absolutely. Before we move on to the next question, I just want to mention to our audience here, as one of the takeaways after today's webinar, we will be providing a spreadsheet that will be super handy in helping you to inventory your HR systems, and just systems in general across the board that your employees are having access to. So we'll be providing that at the end of this webinar, and it'll be available for download on our website in case you need a handy tool to kind of get you started to create that inventory list. And then secondly, before we move on to the next question here, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them into the Q&A. We will be having a Q&A portion towards the end of the hour here. And so if you have any questions for our panelists, I'd be happy to pull those up at that time. All right, let's move on to our next question here. And you've kind of already alluded to it. Everyone here has kind of already alluded to, what were some of the biggest challenges or surprises you encountered during, either your tech evaluation process or your actual implementation process? Lisa, I'm going to go ahead and start with you.
Yeah, I think this has kind of been hinted at in some of the answers to the other questions, but I think it's really like that balance, like the challenge is the balance between what we need as an HR team and like what our ideal would be for reporting and the back end experience versus the employee experience and meeting our employees where they're at, being from kind of a smaller organization where we have very, obviously we have the intergenerational technology relationships, but we also have various workers. We have, kind of operation warehouse workers that aren't at computers all day and have differing levels of technology fluency versus people that are on their computers all day, every day. And so it was balancing all of those things and trying to find the tool that was going to kind of meet us both where we're at, but also kind of move us forward and give us as an HR team kind of a trajectory forward as well. So we weren't limiting ourselves just to meet our staff where they were at. So I think that was certainly one of the biggest challenges for us along the way. And then I think also deciding, like when you're talking, we just recently went through this, a year ago or a year and a half ago where we were doing our search, and the salespeople are promising you the world, saying that they have everything, even if they don't have all the things that you're looking for. Like, then it's like, oh, well, we'll write that down and maybe we'll have that in the future, or you can tweak it, or we have this like, you can do this plugin or something like that. And so it's just kind of being able to discern through the sales pitches, what you're actually getting and who actually is going to ultimately be the right fit, because they're throwing a lot of bells and whistles at you, trying to make the deal totally understand it, respect the hustle. But it just, it's a lot to kind of like sort through. And I think that's where, and my colleague Camille did a really good job of, at the end of the day, going back and looking at reviews and looking at different things online to try to get through the noise. So those are a couple of the challenges that we faced.
No, so true. So true. Tara, what about you in terms of challenges or surprises?
Yeah, I think Lisa, said a lot of great things, especially about the sales pitch. I remember early on in my career, it was seamless. Things were seamless. And it was like that. I just, I know now that's not the truth. And you got to really dig deep to understand, is it a customization or is it a configuration, and understand the cost of it. One thing I learned, especially moving from a large system to another large system, is the implementation team is really critical. And it's got to be a really good fit. And it's important to speak up early on. If it's not working and you can make changes early on, you're going to be more successful. But if you try to kind of ride out an implementation team that's just not making the right decisions, not moving in the direction the company needs, that can really delay the project go live.
Yeah. Rochelle, I'm going to throw this one at you as well before moving on to the next question, because I think, it's always really interesting to hear about the challenges or surprises that others have encountered, because it really helps the rest of us learn kind of what to look out for. So, any additional challenges or surprises that you also encountered?
For sure. One of the things that happened when I implemented an LMS at a government contractor was, and I included an IT representative on the committee to put out the RFP and the whole process. And they didn't have the staff to support a system admin. So ultimately, we ended up making the decision to do completely hosted. So that meaning that you take the structure the way it's delivered as much as possible. Customize it, yes. You can make it pretty. You can make it your color scheme and all of your logos, and you can rearrange a lot of the screens. But if you don't have the manpower or the support from IT, a hosted solution can help you manage it on your own. And when they do upgrades, those upgrades will happen semi-seamlessly. Something will always break, but the breakage is much less when you use a delivered system that is hosted by the company. There's a lot of other questions you need to ask in the RFP to ensure that that's the right solution. But that is one of the things that you can do to limit the impact on your own staff. And as far as surprises go, like doing the inventory, I found out one time that engineering was running a parallel system, that they were mirroring a lot of the HR information that you would normally keep about employees. So that was a surprise. And that was something that we were able to address really quickly about what they were doing with the information, where actually should it be? And come to find out, there was a skills and certifications module of our HRIS system that they weren't using because they didn't know it existed. So hopefully we'll be able to integrate that into the main system so that it can be reported on. And you can put requirements against the other systems like performance management. Have they done their training? That can be pushed into the performance management module. So all of those things are potential challenges that become opportunities.
Thank you. All right. So this next question here is going to be focused on consolidating systems. So, in your experiences, when you've consolidated systems, how do you ensure that you don't lose critical functionality that users rely on? We're going to talk consolidating first, and then our next question is going to be focused on expanding. And so we'll start here with consolidating. Tara, what are your thoughts on, how do you ensure you don't lose critical functionality that users are relying on when you're consolidating systems as opposed to expanding?
Yeah, so I think the inventory that Rochelle was talking about is going to be critical, right? Truly understanding what systems are out there. If you are able to do an all-employee survey, that is very helpful as well, because it can find some hidden employee experience functionality that maybe isn't clearly documented. In my last RFP process, we did a really cool kind of project where we had interviews scheduled with both employees and managers at all levels, so that we could talk to the people that were out driving and not next to a computer, as well as the office workers. And those interviews were actually documenting step by step how they did critical functionality. And as much as I wanted to move the mouse and show them how to do it, it was really eye-opening to understand how they used this system as opposed to how we assumed they use the system. And those interviews really helped document what was critical functionality, as well as a lot of opportunities for improvement, which drove our RFP process to, find that consolidated system.
That's awesome. I wish I would have taken advantage of that in my days in-house, but definitely taking note of that for our consulting projects. Lisa, any thoughts there on, how do you ensure you don't lose critical functionality when you're consolidating?
Yeah, I'm thinking about kind of our transition to payroll systems, because the other team that really utilizes that would be our finance team. And so we really brought them into the process, similar to what others are kind of talking about, where they were part of the conversations with the different providers, so that we could make sure that, they were bought in and that they understood what the transition was going to be and could be ready and prepared for it as it happened. And I think kind of talking to what Tara did as well, at least for then the staff's ability to kind of adapt to the new process. We did something similar. We did focus groups. We've done that on a couple different technology projects where we brought both kind of a combination of early adopters, people we knew that would be bought in and be excited. And then we also kind of brought in some of the people that maybe we struggled a little bit with, their ability to fully engage, and maybe they're a little bit more reluctant. So we kind of had the full spectrum, and that they were able to weigh in, and we were able to see, and they were able to bring up those things that might be issues for the transition, to Tara's point, that we maybe weren't kind of thinking of from those different vantage points.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's great to bring in as many voices as you feel are relevant to making your final decisions on things, but also, in designing the system or customizing it, to ensure you don't kind of lose anything that people are really relying on. Rochelle, I'm going to ask you this next question here. So if you choose to expand your technology or tech stack, what strategies help to ensure that new tools integrated smoothly with existing systems? So thinking about this in a different way, right? So not consolidating, but actually through an expansion, how do you make sure that the integration is there and it isn't a clunky process as you're trying to maybe link together some systems or kind of streamline some processes?
Yeah. So first and foremost, you have to declare what is your database of record. You'd be surprised how many systems actually don't originate in the HRIS. So declare your database of record first. And then you want to know with these potential vendors through the RFP process, what integrations they already have built. To Tara's point, they'll promise you that, oh yeah, we can integrate with any system that you have. Oh, but does it exist already? Have you done it already? Is it a done deal, or are we gonna have to pay for that customization and then everybody else gets to use it? Or is it something that they can just turn on? So the integrations are really important to dig into what exactly they mean by, sure, we'll work with any system. Because you then have to go back to that other vendor and find out if they are willing to work with the potential new vendor. So if they already have an integration built, some people call them a bridge, some people call them an integration, then they've already agreed to work with them. So that first and foremost, database of record, what integrations do they already have? I would probably, I do love Excel and I do love color coding. I would probably do a big, massive chart where you could try to meet X and Y axis with all of the systems that are already integrated that you're seriously considering. You probably don't need that until you're down to like 3 to 5 vendors. Certainly you don't want to do it on every one of them. And you also have to figure out which systems are out of your control, but you are stuck with. For instance, it could be the finance system that it is what it is. They just implemented it. They're not going to spend more money. You're going to have to figure out how to work with it. That could drive which next system you're looking at. So identify which systems are critical to somebody else that integrate and which direction data flows. Active Directory is really important. So that's how IT creates emails. Usually there's a push from the HRIS into Active Directory and then back because they have to feed the new employee email and the hierarchy of job changes, managers, etc., back into Outlook so that you can see contact lists and organizational charts, etc. So all of those things, what your core systems are, which ones are not going to change in the next 3 to 5 years, and which ones possibly are already on the table for being upgraded, changed, or dropped or whatever, so that you aren't counting on connecting to a system that is then not going to exist. So all of those things, data in, data out, data integrity. Does the system have the ability to mask or format data that is being typed in by the candidate, for instance, in an ATS? There's no bigger thing that makes my left eye twitch than when I see some people's names in sentence case and some people's names in all caps. So those are the types of things that seems like that's really far in the weeds. So again, you're going to take those things down, maybe when you get to the last 3 to 5 vendors, but you've already done so much pre-work with a technology committee, with doing user experience surveys. All of those things will help drive the funnel to where you can naturally cut down your vendors to what seems to make the most sense. And also, like, what are you trying to get out of it? What is the ultimate end goal? If you don't know what your ultimate end goal is, you're just putting a bow on another system that probably is going to do pretty similar to what you're currently using. So ensure that you know what the end goal is going to be, whether it is the consolidation of reporting or the analytics or the user experience or some combination thereof, and be able to articulate what the end goal is for the system.
Michelle, I think you tackled it all, but I'm still going to ask Lisa and Tara if they have anything to add there on if you're choosing to expand, what strategies kind of help you ensure that those new tools integrate smoothly with existing systems. Either of you have anything additional?
The only thing I would add, and it's more about the employee experience, is consider how the new systems, how the employee is going to log into the new systems. The more that you can do single sign-on, the easier it is for employees. The biggest complaint I've gotten in the past is another password that I have to create, right? And so consider, can it be single sign-on? And if not, what is the employee experience to get into and reset their password in that new system?
Great idea. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and move on then to a different question here. So regardless if you're consolidating or you're expanding, what are some of the hidden costs or the unexpected savings that came out of your HR tech overhaul? So when you think back on some experiences you've had, whether you're consolidating, whether you're expanding, were you in a situation where you had found some hidden costs that you weren't aware of? Maybe it wasn't disclosed during the RFP, or maybe it was, but there wasn't enough digging into what it really meant, or were there's maybe some unexpected savings that kind of came out of consolidating or expanding that you didn't really anticipate? Let me see, Lisa, if you wouldn't mind answering, do you have any thoughts there as it relates to hidden costs or unexpected savings?
Yeah, I think there'd been so when I inherited our HR department a few years ago, I think there had been some real hesitation to move into more technology solutions because they just initially thought like, oh, it's going to cost us more money to, like, they were kind of operating on just a payroll only provider with no HRIS. And it turned out like we were able to move payroll and get the full blown HRIS with performance and a lot of other bells and whistles and ATS that we hadn't had any of those things before, and we're actually initially paying less money than we were just for the payroll only provider. So I think that was kind of surprising. I think sometimes on first blush people will be like, oh, it's just going to cost us a lot of money, and I've experienced that at a few different places where the wall's just up to it because they're just assuming there's going to be the expense. So that was really nice to be able to come back and be like, actually, we're going to have all of this functionality. We're going to have so much more capacity, and we're going to be saving money on our monthly bill. But to the point, kind of with the last question, where kind of some costs come up, it's like, oh, as we kind of build out our system, I think that's where we're seeing, like little drips and drabs here and there, but it's just like, okay, like our current background check system, for example, doesn't integrate, but there's one that does, but the cost of the background checks is much more expensive on the other one, but the integration is that saving us time. So there's kind of those like little add-ons that do come up. We've been fortunate that it's not really significant so far, but those are kind of things that have come up along the way that have kind of been like, oh, we didn't take that into account. It's like, oh, yes, we can do all these add-ons, but are they going to be more expensive? And to keep our kind of ecosystem more tightly wound, it might cost more money than kind of doing, unconsolidated systems. So.
Yeah, no, definitely. Tara, what are your thoughts there on hidden costs or unexpected savings?
Yeah, I think, to Lisa's point about the multiple systems and the cost savings, it's a kind of eye-opening if you're at a company that has different systems and year over year contracts have renewed at different paces and you haven't had that beautiful spreadsheet Rochelle was talking about to show everything. When we did our RFP process and I brought all of the different systems into one spreadsheet, it was surprising the cost savings that you'd have. The implementation still had a significant cost, right? Like the first year and getting it set up was a big cost, but the actual annual cost when we consolidated was saving the company money. And nobody expected that because a lot of these onesie, twosies, smaller contracts were just kind of forgotten about until you pulled it all together.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's, a great way to look at things is, of course, sometimes budget does drive the decision, right? And so, in a perfect world, it would be great to make this decision when it's time to enhance technology or solve for a situation or an issue, or maybe as the company is growing. But sometimes it just comes down to budget, and you ultimately just need to find out if making a change, whether it be, consolidation or even expansion in some cases. I mean, sometimes it can produce some unexpected savings that you're not necessarily thinking. You would just assume it's systems, it's going to cost a lot, and you don't necessarily, if you don't go through the due diligence, it can be difficult to not fully understand kind of what the impact is. Rochelle, I'm going to ask you this one as well, just because, I think that probably a lot of people who are participating today live, as well as those who are going to be listening and watching this post-webinar, are probably faced with this now more than ever, just with the economic climate and with, budgets being tighter than ever going into a new calendar year. I know that inventorying the systems is step number one. But from a hidden cost or unexpected savings point of view, have you had experiences in your past where through an overhaul you were surprised at either one or the other, and in which cases do you think that it really helped with the business case, to move forward and to make decisions at the leadership level?
Sure. So one time at a manufacturing plant, we integrated or we expanded and changed our HRIS, added, so consolidated it with their payroll. And then we were also able to track training. It was rudimentary, but at least we could track it, completions. But the unexpected win was that they already had charge codes integrated. So the time savings, which sometimes is hard to put a dollar figure on, but the time savings of not having to keep a spare spreadsheet where you're tracking 15 minutes to this project and an hour and a half to that project, and this customer and that customer, being able to feed those in every time a new project was created. Finance was able to feed those codes in. The employees were able to immediately be able to charge to those charge codes. And the other thing that was good about it was that people who weren't on that project couldn't charge to that project. If there was a special case and you needed to, it's a simple ticket to finance. Hey, can you add me onto this project for the next 3 weeks because I'm doing a special thing with them? Great. So that streamlined a lot of accounting processes, a lot of payroll processes, as well as the employee themselves being able to track their time. So that was an unexpected win to a system that we implemented. And to Tara's point about single sign-on, one of the other things that can come out of a total inventory and redo of your systems, and whether it's an expansion or consolidation, is user groups. User groups and permissions are really, really important, and you can't have different levels of permissions for the same person in different systems. They might have access to different things in different systems, but there should be a user group that's built around skill set job profile, job family, whatever the case may be, that their permissions are going to be determined ahead of time, so that you're not doing line by line permissions for each individual person. So that's a time crunch on IT to be figuring out what should their permissions be in this system. If you do it by job family, at least potentially by job code or job profile, then you will have at least the 90% solution of what they should have access to. And also that means when people change jobs, they aren't left with permissions to something that they now shouldn't have access to. So it works both directions, giving them the access immediately upon hire or upon completion of a training to the things that they need to do their job, but also making sure that people don't keep access to systems that they shouldn't have it once they've moved on to another job.
Thank you for that. And we are getting close to our Q&A time, guys. So I am just going to share my screen here and remind you that we will have a recording of this session available post-webinar. And we will also be providing you access to download an HR tech stack inventory spreadsheet that we had mentioned previously, just to get you started. I mean, certainly, it'll be editable because it will be in a Excel format so that you can, customize it and make it your own. But it's a great starting point, particularly because a lot of our conversation today is really kind of talked about how it really is foundational to making decisions on whether to expand or consolidate, is really that first step of kind of inventorying your systems. And here we are at the Q&A sesh, guys. So we have a question that came in that is very, it kind of builds upon what we were just talking about. So I'm going to read this one off first. How can we justify the cost of consolidation to leadership when they see multiple tools as quote unquote already paid for? And this is a great question. I'm also going to make the assumption that in this case, quote unquote, already paid for might mean that there isn't maybe an annual cost tied to it, or the annual cost is somehow absorbed or hits a certain cost center that might not necessarily feel as if it's hitting a particular budget that needs to be scrutinized more closely. So we're going to just have to make some assumptions there on what quote unquote already paid for means. But let's see, we'll start with Tara just to see. Tara, do you have any comments related to this question? And if you need to pass, that's okay. Just let me know.
I think it's really important kind of identifying what you're trying to solve with your system review, right? And so there has to be a point where you do the sales pitch to the leaders on what you're getting out of the new consolidated system. And it can be realistic in a phased approach, right? It's going to be a better employee experience, a better manager experience, future state, predictive analytics, and we can drive actionable reports for managers, that will drive business. I know in the HR world, it's tough because a lot of our costs are tough to tie back to business results, but the more that you can do that and focus on the manager experience, the cost of turnover, it's part of that sales pitch, I would say.
That's great. Lisa or Rochelle, any comments related to that question?
I think what Tara's saying is pretty spot on, like being able to extend what the business proposition is beyond just the HR's experience and our ability to do our jobs, but how it's going to impact managers and staff and better enable them to do their roles or to free them up to focus on, kind of their focus areas, I think is really important. I think, unfortunately, sometimes with leadership, at least in my experience, the buy-in kind of comes after they see the thing working really well, or So like I think to some degree, if there's any way to pull them in on some of the sales pitches and they can get excited about it like during the process and they can start seeing it for themselves, that if that's an option, that's, you know, something that I think can be sometimes effective because especially people that don't work in, you know, the HR industry aren't really able to fully visualize how this technology can really impact the full business. And I think sometimes you have to see it to believe it.
Yeah.
And connect those dots.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, for sure.
That's, mm-hmm.
And sometimes system updates, whether they're a consolidation or expansion, can give you a better picture of your checks and balances. So that feeds into, you know, auditing processes, even customer satisfaction. So there are ways definitely to tie it back to business. And the biggest, I think, help for you as an HR professional would be to really ingratiate yourself and interview your leaders from all of your functional departments.
Yeah, that's great. We've got another question here too. Are there any trends we should be preparing for in 2026 when it comes to HR tech, more specifically around AI or analytics? So, you know, I think what could be great is maybe talking about some of your experiences to date with maybe AI or analytics and kind of maybe where you're intending on taking, you know, what initiatives you might be building around that for 2026. And then certainly if you are aware of any trends out there, you can certainly share with us. But I think, you know, nothing beats hearing directly from you in terms of how you intend on how you're currently using AI and how you intend on using it, as well as, you know, how you're using analytics and how you intend on doing that for 2026. Let's see, Lisa, if you wouldn't mind kind of sharing your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, we're kind of a baby organization when it comes to this sort of stuff. So, I mean, I think some of the things that we're seeing in this might be stuff that folks are already using, but certainly the use of AI around policy building, we're utilizing and about to roll out, you know, kind of an electronic handbook, which I'm sure a lot of you all have, but that's been really huge for us is being able to utilize that that has AI capabilities to help us build out the policies. So I think that's been really big. But I'm actually really curious what other folks are doing in this space because again, we're kind of not on the forefront, so to speak, on the AI front.
Well, you're definitely not giving yourself enough credit because there are a lot of companies out there that do not have an electronic handbook. I'll tell you that right now. And you know, I think, you know, AI is such a new frontier for a lot of organizations. And I think, you know, we as HR leaders are still getting our heads wrapped around what that means for our organization and how can we, you know, help to make decisions that are going to influence systems and processes and practices. So, you know, I wouldn't say it's the Wild West, but it's definitely, I think, you know, everyone's at their own pace. Each organization's at their own pace, as well as each HR leaders at their own pace in terms of like how they're adopting this technology and, you know, how they intend on making decisions for, you know, coming years. And, you know, the decision that might get made right now for 2026 might be, you know, a totally different situation or story or decision when it comes to 2027. Things are just moving so fast. So I think there's a lot of organizations that are just totally in different spots and all of it's okay, right? You know, I think we're all just, you know, we're learning, we're, you know, working with cross-functional partners to determine, you know, kind of which stance we should have towards AI, you know, because there's legal ramifications and, you know, there's lots of different, you know, impacts that it goes beyond HR. And so it's kind of important to kind of have a great stakeholder team that kind of helps you make, you know, those decisions. Tara, any thoughts for you like around, you know, how you guys use AI versus analytics versus, you know, maybe any trends that you're seeing out there that you're looking forward to kind of incorporating into your strategy?
Yeah, I would say, you know, AI is super interesting. It's a bit scary as well, you know, and so at our company, at my last company, we really had started a committee to try to create an AI policy and AI strategy on like what the company is willing to do, because the last thing you want is everybody choosing a different tool, uploading data, and that data goes anywhere, right? Because there's a lot of cool analytics, predictive analytics related to AI that we were testing, but nothing actually to launch. I will say personally, I love ChatGPT, and I load my daughter's drawings and say, create a comic book or create a coloring page. And it's super fun, but I'm not, at the point that I would truly kind of want to move forward unless we understood the tool, the guardrails, the security around it. There's a lot of IT partnership that's really critical to make sure the tool that the company's using is going to be both beneficial, but also protect who's using it and the company and the employee data. In terms of some trends, as we've looked at new tools and updates to performance review systems or applicant tracking systems, I think we saw this personalization start in the benefits world, years ago, where it was like, oh, it's a shopping experience and it's personalized to you. I'm seeing a lot of that personalization move over into the other HR systems now. So I'm excited to see where that goes in the next year or two, because I think it's going to really improve the employee's experience and meet them where they want to be for whatever HR process they're doing.
Yeah, really great point.
For sure. Yeah. I am cautiously optimistic about the ethical use of AI.
Great way to put it.
Yes.
Yeah. So they've already shown that there is some built-in bias in AI, especially with the applicant tracking and screening. One of the things that people need to really understand is that it's really a web search on steroids with some attitude thrown in. So it's searching the internet for what's already out there. And we all know that there's a lot out there on the internet that isn't something that we would use as a response to an employee, as research data. It also cannot tell you if something has been canceled, like a policy has been canceled or is no longer active, because it's searching the whole web. It can give you some very interesting returns, but you also have to validate every one of those returns. So the thing that if you're looking at, for instance, an applicant tracking system that has its own form of AI, there are a lot of questions and there is no guidelines yet. But there are a lot of questions you have to ask, and partnering with IT is honestly your first step about how did they develop their AI tool, and what are the protections that they put in place, and have they validated that there aren't built-in biases, intentional or unintentional. And there's already been a case where they have shown that you as the employer are the ultimate responsible person or party to any unintended bias complaint. You can't slough it off and say, oh, well, that's the applicant tracking system and that's how they did it. You are ultimately taking responsibility for the results that come out of those AI screening tools. So again, cautiously optimistic.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think too, a lot of us are, I'm learning more about it on the daily, right? There's the language learning models like ChatGPT that we're aware of, and then there's agentic AI where there's agents that are being created, and we have a couple of clients that are definitely immersed in this world a little more than maybe some other organizations that I know of. And agentic AI is something that they are really looking at for 2026 and into 2027 to augment their staff, not necessarily replace, but elevate the work. So thinking about, agentic AI, great example is, anytime you purchase something, but you need to speak with customer service, those chat bots or different, agents that you might, even if you're making a phone call, you end up in the phone tree, but it's an agent that's responding to your responses and to your questions. So, that's one area, but a lot of, companies that I know that are leveraging this technology are also looking to find ways to, put these these AI agents in place for certain mundane or repetitive tasks to take that responsibility off of an employee, whether that be someone in HR, whether that be someone in another department or function within an organization. So it's something I think that HR professionals are needing to spearhead for the organization at large, but then also are kind of looking at, okay, how do we augment our own staff in ways with these new AI tools? And so it's really, it's exciting, but as everyone has shared, it's also really scary because we don't necessarily have the rules and the guidelines in place to be able to do these sorts of things in a way that may be ethical or maybe helping the business. I think some of the things that are being deployed may hurt the business in the interim, while the long term could be more of a help. It just is something that's a little bit trial and error at the moment, and it's interesting to watch, but it's also hard to build that into your upcoming year's strategy when it's something that's being developed. It's building the plane while you're flying it. So it's a very interesting time, and I do encourage anyone who is looking into leveraging AI or even taking their analytics to the next level to really ensure you've got the right partners to help you do so, but also to make sure that you feel really confident in the different options that are out there. So would encourage you to do your due diligence there to ensure that you're in a good spot before making any big decisions for the org or incorporating it into your strategy. All right, we've got a few minutes left. I'm going to ask one last question, and so give me your 10 to 30 second response here. If you could go back and do one thing differently in your HR tech journey, what would it be? Rochelle, I'm going to start with you. Give me your best 30 seconds or less response.
Wow. I would say to be more involved from the beginning in the process of determining what it is that we have and what it is that we need. I developed that checklist after several projects. We not necessarily stumbled, but the lessons learned drove this checklist that we're going to be delivering to the participants. So I'm super excited about it. Hopefully I can save someone else some time and effort.
Fantastic. Lisa, what about you? If you could go back and do one thing differently on your tech journey, what would it be?
I think I would trust my gut, my instincts a bit more. I think we spent a little extra time kind of doing our due diligence, which is important, but like kind of really vetting things when I think we really knew what direction we wanted to go in. And that's kind of where we landed after the whole process. But I think just kind of trusting myself a bit more in the decision-making process and giving that a bit more weight.
Great. And Tara, what about you?
I think early on in my career, I would have focused on change management a lot more and understand the emotional side of these changes. Communication and empathy and understanding the employee experience are just as important as the technical part of the rollout. And that's something I try to focus on now.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for your insights. This has been really valuable. I hope that our participants also have found this a valuable use of your time. In addition to some great conversation and some great tips and tricks, you also are able to get some professional development credits. So go ahead and take a look here for your SHRM activity ID as well as your HRCI program ID. We will be sending these out to our live participants as well. So don't feel like you have to feverishly write this down. And also listed here is our contact information. So if you need any assistance as it relates to HR consulting for special projects, interim support, fractional resources, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you to our panelists for spending your time and sharing your experiences with us. I know that it's incredibly valuable to learn from the best and also to really get some great insights and tips and tricks. And, you know, hopefully the download that we're sharing with you will also help you on your journey to figuring out, is it time to expand or consolidate? So thank you all for your time. Really appreciate the insights today. And thank you to our panelists.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. All right. Take care, everyone.